Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. This is episode 134, Overcoming Disordered Eating. How do you get off the restriction roller coaster? We're going to talk about today some contributing factors that are maybe lesser known as to why women eat emotionally. There are physiological reasons for sure, hormonal and whatnot, but there's just some thought process at the root of why we are prone to do this. And a lot of it has to do with our culture and some of the triggers that we have inside with relation to objectification of our bodies. So sometimes we rebel and we don't know we're rebelling, which is a good thing in this instance, but also helpful to have the awareness around why it's happening. And so we can do something different. So Camille Martin is my guest. She's a registered dietitian, public health writer, and a former, what she calls chronic dieter. Today, she's dedicated to helping women quit dieting, set bigger and better goals, reclaim their excitement for life, and lose weight in the process. That sounds like a win-win to me. So also just a reminder that we're going to have some really exciting offerings coming down the track. Please follow me on my Instagram, Sheree.Burton. You can also ask to join the private Facebook group, Women Seeking Wholeness. I'm revamping some things. I'm so excited. I went to a really cool three-day retreat online, which was different but amazing. And I saw so many fellow truth seekers and just women who want to make a difference entrepreneur-wise, step into their soulpreneur path. And it has really prompted me to come back into the space of guiding women through that process if it's their desire. So some of my programs are getting revamped, spruced up a bit, and really dialed in on this whole, who am I? How do I tap into my own divine feminine energy? How do I balance the sacred masculine and feminine within? And then how do I step out into the world if it's my desire to have an impact and to use my gifts in a way and my voice in a way that helps guide others to a place of healing and empowerment. So stay tuned for some of those offerings. And again, welcoming Camille Martin here, our resident expert in how to overcome disordered eating. Camille, I'm so excited for this discussion.
Yes, me too. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah.
Well, you know, when you and I talked before, I feel like we were just like, dee, because there was so much.
Oh my gosh.
This whole idea of how you really land into your body and out of your head. With the thought spiraling and different things like that, but how you really actually stay empowered and in your body.
Yeah.
So there's so many ways we dissociate, and I know, but the first place I want to start is kind of your journey with your own I don't want to say eating disorder. I don't know if you had an eating disorder.
No, it's I did have
some variation on the theme of that. So
yeah, well, I definitely did have an eating disorder. I was bulimic for probably 5 years, starting in college, and I didn't fully shake that until I was in my first job, my first professional job. But even before that, I was an emotional eater, which I still fight those tendencies. And I would call that disordered eating, you know.
Sure.
But it started when I was 12 years old. I started dieting. And my mom and none of the women that were around me were talking about they talked about diets, but no one was saying to me, you need to lose weight, you need to go on a diet. But I just absorbed this message that what I looked like was most important. And that coupled with feeling, you know, I was 12, so I was in the 7th grade, but you feel out of place. You feel like you don't fit in. You feel kind of lonely. And I think everybody feels that way. But for me, those two things converged to make me feel like if I look perfect, then I will be okay. Then I will be acceptable.
Everything will, yeah.
Yeah. But so I was eating to fill the void of feeling lonely and kind of isolated, but also at the same time having this intense pressure to look perfect. And those weren't matching up. So I would go off into my parents' den with a whole bunch of food and lock myself in there and turn on the TV and just binge eat. And it made me feel better. So I learned that I associated eating with filling an emotional void. And And then, I would gain weight. I would diet to try to lose the weight. And then I felt almost like I was powerless to stop eating so much. So during the day, I was trying not to eat, like at school, but then I would come home and binge eat. So I got into a destructive cycle very, very early on. And then that continued all the way through high school and college. And in college, I just felt like I had no control over anything anymore. So the only option I felt like, instead of being able to understand why I was eating the way I was and to try to fix the reasons behind binge eating and emotional eating, was to just solve the problem. And the only way I knew how to do that was to get rid of the food, eat and binge and purge. So it was very, very painful. And so during all those years, I tried every diet that you could possibly imagine and go on. Diet pills. I was over exercising. So it was a mess. And I don't think my story is really that unique, unfortunately.
No, yeah. I've really dissected this for myself, and I actually tried to be bulimic. I know I don't want to minimize or sound trite or whatever.
I tried to, yeah.
I tried anorexia and bulimia and they didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. Not to say that couldn't have been a track that had I continued to pursue it would have, but for me, it was just a lot of shame. Like literally and it's just still something that I think many of us grapple with, is that there's just this mild anxiety when something is put before you to eat.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
But it was really marked in those years where I was trying to really, date and, time I was doing beauty pageants and,
oh yeah, that's even more extreme, I'm sure.
Yeah. So it became this really weird, as I look at it from a spiritual standpoint, I was eating, and consuming in a way to sort of evade. And you talked about this too, but it was like, if I stuff myself with this, then I won't then I don't have to so it's like input versus output. I don't have to express. I don't have to share how I really feel. I can just swallow down the emotion and swallow down the food. But when you're confronted with choice around what's given to you to eat, whether you're with friends or you're at the grocery store or something.
Yeah.
It can trigger like your old stuff from back in the days when you were so fixated on what was good, bad, or whatever. So what is your philosophy, like, as you've bridged over from having this disordered eating and eating disorders and, I think we're all still in recovery around that. Most of us just trying to live our lives and be healthy and love our bodies. And it's a struggle because we're just confronted with so much. But what was that like bridging philosophy or bridged belief that you really had to internalize? What was like the magic thing for you to really get in order for you to start healing?
Well, the defining moment was when I think I was in my early 30s. I lived in my apartment in Atlanta and I had one of my first jobs and I was so excited to be on my own. But I had continued and was still doing all of the crazy things. I had stopped binging and purging, which was a huge thing. And it was if you want to feel like self-esteem being obliterated, binging and purging is the most, I can't even really put it into words, the sense of just self-hatred, because it's like food is your life source. And I was not just eating it, I was vomiting. It was awful. So just to get past that was a huge hurdle. But I was still continuing with, psychotic eating behaviors. Like I would go to work and not eat all day. And I would drink. I remember I drank Diet Dr. Pepper all day without eating. No water. Nobody drank water. I don't remember when the whole water thing started, but I don't remember ever drinking water. And then I would come home and try to eat, a lean cuisine and work out. So I was doing stuff like that. I was obsessing about food. I was always, if I go out with my girlfriends and we go to a Mexican restaurant and I eat chips and cheese dip and drink 3 margaritas, and, that was like, I had so much fun. And then the next day I felt like such a failure. And so it was just constant. And I just remember one day, I sat down on my couch and I just burst into tears. I just was saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep subjecting myself to this, sprinting 3 miles. And then, it was just crazy. So I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I decided in that moment that I was going to quit dieting for good. And I knew that if I quit doing that, I just knew that I was going to, if I allowed myself to eat whatever I wanted to eat, I was going to gain all this weight. And I was actually okay with it. I'm so sorry. My dogs, I should have given them a bone or something. But anyway, I decided I would rather gain weight and be peaceful than to continue with this craziness. Sure. So I decided I was going to quit dieting, and I did. And the next morning, I just felt this sense of peace. It was like I had just dropped a cement, block off my back. And I said, I'm going to eat whatever I want. And at first I was like, this is kind of fun. I can just eat. But the crazy thing is that I didn't choose the same foods. I did at first, but like if I picked up a carton of ice cream and said, you can eat this whole thing if you want to, I didn't want to,
Yeah. It's like you can date, like you're dating this guy and your parents are like, don't date this guy.
Yeah.
It makes you want to date the guy even more. But when they say, oh, you can date the guy, you don't want him as much.
He's not that interesting. Yeah. Well, I was creating all this resistance around food. Like I can't do this. I'm not supposed to do that. And then, when I allowed myself to, I had some ice cream and it tasted great. But then after a certain point where normally I would just keep binging and eating it, I stopped and I was like, this doesn't make me feel very good. Okay, well, I'm going to put it down. So I actually lost weight when I stopped dieting. Mm-hmm. And the most fun thing was that when all of my attention was taken off what I looked like, what I was going to eat, I mean, it really dominated my life. Once I was not thinking about that, I started to get creative and started cooking a little bit. I decided I wanted to learn about nutrition and how food affected my body. So I went to the university downtown in Atlanta after work and I took a nutrition class, and then I kept going and going. I became a dietitian. I mean, it changed my whole career path. So in retrospect, I looked back in retrospect and I realized that setting goals that didn't have anything to do with what I looked like really accelerated my healthy habits and my confidence, and was a real a catalyst. Well, I guess what I would say is it worked hand in hand with me changing my eating habits and changing the things that I did body-wise. And they all just sort of fed off each other. And it turned everything around. So within a year, I had lost weight. I felt better than I ever had. And it was like a miracle. Yeah. So that was my long story to tell you. That was my moment.
Yeah. So it feels like you just really got clear inside with how you want to feel. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As ultimately it's like, you can look this way and you can kill yourself off with all this energy. But for me, it just took up so much internal energy to keep analyzing and getting the latest, all the plans. I remember doing Atkins, all those, you just, what's the latest thing? And so it feels like you just came into deep listening and went, okay, how do I actually want to feel? Which is feminine, divine feminine sort of way of coming back home to yourself. Well,
and I do want to say that was the start of the journey. And that was when I was probably 35 maybe, and now I'm 51. So it's been a long time. And I've had many, many years to keep working on that. And it's a process. But I do want to say there is still not one day that goes by where I'm not looking down at my stomach when I get out of bed. What do I look like today?
Yeah.
It's like a disease. And I just want your listeners to know that even when you start making all these connections, it's such a beautiful thing. But don't be hard on yourself when it doesn't fully go away, and it may never. I went through a divorce in 2018 and 2019, and my binge behaviors took over full force. And I knew, like, don't beat yourself up, try to improve. But I gave myself a break because I was binge eating or not eating at all. And I was drinking too much, and it's just a process. It doesn't happen overnight and you flip the switch and then you're better, so.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and sort of framing that, because I do think we get into these rigid, like, oh, I thought I healed that. I thought that was gone.
Yeah.
And I went through a really hard time around 2018 and 19 as well. And you and I are about the same age. It had to be our Chiron return from our astrological chart. But there's something about hitting 50 and like 49 to 50 where you're just like, you come back into, because I almost got divorced those years. I was, my husband and I were separated in 2019 for 10 months and ultimately reconciled. We're coming up on 26 years, but it was the same thing. The first thing to go the first pattern I went into was disordered eating. And it was because I was so stressed, I couldn't eat.
Oh yeah.
Before it would have been like a binge thing.
Yeah.
This time it became such a high anxious state that I completely lost my appetite. I think I lost
I hate to say
30
this,
pounds and
I'm jealous. I gained 20 pounds and you lost 30. So yeah. But it's hard. And that's another, I don't know, we probably don't have time. We'll have to do another podcast, but my divorce I can see now was wrapped up in all of this crap that was put on me growing up, this chauvinistic kind of, I grew up watching my mother my parents are wonderful, but my dad is very chauvinistic, and I watched her be subservient and constantly defer to my dad. And so I married someone and I was repeating that and like shoving down all of this. It started to be anger and then rage, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. But I'm seeing now that it's all tied to society's it's just this message and this brainwashing that little girls are subjected to, that what we look like matters more than anything. And if you continue to shove down your potential and your feelings and your sexuality, all of it, it's going to backfire, and it's going to result in you using food, using alcohol or prescription drugs to make yourself feel better. And then that's going to show up outwardly. And the more that does, we get shamed more by society. So
such a vicious cycle.
It is.
I remember, I totally agree with you too. And I remember learning about this thing called lookism. When I was going to school, and how we objectify women in our culture. We objectify men too, but it's a different, different level of like, hey, sort of like you're saying, like your worth is tied into how your outward features present themselves.
Yeah.
So, you could call it like the trophy wife. You could call it, there's so many names for what this is. And it's not just about being in a marriage. We send messages to girls very, very young, unknowingly sometimes, about their bodies. And I think I was telling you this before when we talked last time, but I remember I was probably about 5 years old. We lived in Florida. I have a sister a year older, so she would have been 6. I have another sister 2 years younger. She would have been 3. Yeah. And my grandparents were visiting us. And I remember I was walking, I was in my swimsuit. There were my sisters, and we were like walking to the beach. And my mom was talking to, either my grandma or grandpa or somebody.
Yeah.
And she said, Cherie, cause they were all watching us, little girls. And this is no disrespect to my mom, like at all. She would like,
yeah, sure.
Whatever. My mom is super amazing that way, but in terms of like edifying us, but she said to my grandma or grandpa, she's like, that Cherie, she's just bright. And my sister that's a year older is like a stick, like literally a stick. And she's older than me, but yet I'm like curvy. Like even at that age, I had like hips. I just look completely different. And so she says, yeah, she's just right.
Yeah.
And I thought,
isn't that crazy?
That sounds to me, it didn't sound special. It sounded like average.
Yeah.
I internalize it. Like you were saying, maybe no adults said anything to you directly or whatever. It's just different personalities and different temperaments. We internalize things. Sorry, I don't know why I need to maybe I have some emotion coming up through my throat.
That's okay.
Keep joking.
And I'm sorry. I feel like my dogs are getting ready to bark and I feel terrible. Yeah.
It's okay. But yeah, I mean, how our perception, the sunglasses or the lenses we're looking at to the world is that we're going to take in information and interpret it based on what we think an ideal is. And I thought that my older sister was the ideal. And that kind of went through our whole, childhood, adolescent. She was the homecoming queen, first attendant, to the prom queen. She was second run up to junior miss, and here I am a grade younger than her. And we had very different talent. Her talents were more overt, but very beautiful. And she was always getting complimented on her charisma and her beauty. And I wasn't ugly. I knew I wasn't ugly.
Oh, you're beautiful. That's
no. I mean, but back then, acne and braces and frizzy hair. But even my pictures, I had friends. I was well liked at school. I had talents, but for some reason, that beauty thing, that wanting to be the best, most beautiful version.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's what we're taught.
Ruled.
Yes.
It ruled my psyche.
Totally. It's the thing you aspire to growing up because that's what we're spoon fed. My 11-year-old daughter asked me, let's see, it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago. She just came down the stairs and said, Mommy, am I ugly? And I just said, oh God, here we go. This BS is already starting. And I said, you are beautiful. And I'm not just saying that because I'm your mother, but it is devastating to me that my children are asking me, am I fat? Am I ugly? And it's got to stop. Here's the thing. We all know the beauty industry, the fashion industry, it's changing. Mm-hmm. It's got a detrimental effect, but it just goes so much deeper. Like what you were saying, those stories about, you internalize all these messages and it's not deliberate because all the people who are around us, adults growing up, were also influenced by these same things.
Yeah. I would say more so our mothers. You're around my age, but our parents are baby boomers and then their parents, the 1950s housewife. Can you imagine the pressure there?
That makes me angry.
The heels with the apron and, No,
that just pisses me off so bad. I mean, my dad told me when I was, before I went to college, I said, Dad, what should I major in? What should I do? What should I be when I grow up? And I was just looking at him like, Daddy, tell me. And he said to me, well, there's nothing more important than being a good wife and a good mother. And I just remember that just went straight into my heart. I wasn't angry. I didn't know that there was anything different. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess it doesn't really matter what my goals are. Maybe I shouldn't have any goals. I need to be a good wife. And
I went through that. I got that with my religion. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, and bless, we're not saying, you and I, hello, mothering is it, right? We're not saying that that's not amazing and important, but when you're lumping your whole identification and your whole trajectory in life and your whole birth around your roles.
It's a role. Exactly. I'm not a mother. I'm Camille. And I have children and they're the joy of my life and being a good wife. But like, what does that mean? A good
what
wife.
Is that?
Yeah. I want to have a partner who cherishes me and whom I cherish, but that was the message I got, is it was a role. I was here to serve other people, and that's it. Yeah.
Service-based, outward. And because women are so relational, a lot more studies show that women are a lot more relational than men. So a man, I believe that, take care of himself and be like, woo, and not ever really. I mean, not ever. That's a real blanket statement, but but his go-to is himself. His go-to is to take care of what's happening here. And so women, we're kind of like, that's our last thing. We're looking out here and we're being relational, and we're seeing how we can make connections and how we can serve and help. And sometimes at the expense of, and I do think that can contribute to disordered eating.
Absolutely.
You're cooking for everyone else. You're spending so much time on and so it's like, for me, one of my biggest challenges, I'll be honest, maybe you could coach me on this.
Okay.
is taking, like, I know what works for me nutritionally. I know what foods help me feel alive, and I know how to eat. And I've kind of fine-tuned that process for myself.
Yeah. And
it feels like my biggest block is when it's time. Like it's preparing the stuff. Yeah. It's not okay. So even cooking for my family can be a challenge, because it seems, I don't know, I have this block around, like, it just seems like such a burden.
Oh yeah.
To do all the chopping and like the prepping and I know when I do that, I feel better overall, but for some reason I just have this resistance to really making that an established pattern.
Yes. First of all, I relate to this. I think any mom can relate to this. We are flat out exhausted. I mean, just getting my kids to school this morning was like, your hair's on fire and you're going through the car line on fumes, and it's like, we're just wheeling in, here we come. But yeah, I mean, I have all this healthy stuff in my refrigerator. And frankly, right now I have a salad that I want to eat for lunch. I know by the time I'm done with your podcast and then I get work done for my regular job and I've got all this stuff, and then to straighten up the house, the last thing I want to do is make a salad. I just want to grab something out of the fridge and just eat it. And by the end of the day, a lot of the times, I mean, I just say, let's just get DoorDash. And I'm a bad dietitian for saying this, but I want women to know, most importantly, that if you get tired and you don't feel like cooking, just do the best that you can. So shoot for 2 nights a week, make a meal. You don't have to make a meal for your family every single night and make it perfect. But one of my best tips, I think, to fix that is do all the prepping, as much as you can prep before nighttime comes. So in the morning or at night, if you're more of a night person, I'm a morning person. I get everything most days prepped before it's time for dinner. So if I'm making a broccoli casserole, I just put the whole thing together and then it's ready to go in the oven. Or if I'm making a big salad, I mean, it's so scary, but it's like, all I got to do is wash a tomato and get the pre-washed lettuce and throw it in a bowl. But I don't feel like
when I actually time it. See, this is what
doesn't take long. Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot of time. I think it's just like the minutia of like washing the vegetables, and getting out the chopping board. Like, some people love that and it's their thing, and they just, it's their art, or they just think it's the most amazing thing, and they're planning and whatever. And I have to say, that's one of my life goals as I get older, is to be that like matriarch where everyone comes over and they just feel so fed because here's a new recipe and isn't it so yummy and healthy. But yeah, when I actually look at how much time it takes, like you said, to wash the tomato and cut, it's nothing. It's like a minute. It doesn't take.
Well, I also try to look at it like, I mean, I'm a dietitian, for crying out loud. I mean, I beat myself up. I should be in the kitchen, with all of these gorgeous salads and like all my vegan recipes on Pinterest. And
I have so many Pinterest boards with recipes.
Oh my God. Well, I need to take pictures of my food and post on Instagram. I've got all this pressure that I need to do all of these things, but 2 things I have to remind myself of. have are, number one, I cannot compare myself to other people who are doing all these things. It's hard not to.
It's so hard not to.
I look at all the things I do all day that are so amazing and outstanding. So focus on that first. Give yourself a break. If you have a goal of cooking more, please don't set your goal as 5 nights a week, make a, from scratch recipe. But number two, if you can, or anyone that's listening, start trying to look at cooking as a self-care activity. So maybe start, if you're home during the day and the kids aren't here, set aside, 30 or 40 minutes, even 15 or 20, and just say, I'm going to go into my kitchen and this is going to be a self-care activity. Even if you don't love to cook, just set aside 30 minutes to make something for yourself. And actually on my website, this is critical, is that your kitchen environment is everything for your health, and your environment's always working, whether you know it or not. But most of us aren't even aware of our environment because we're so used to looking at the same thing. But if you get in your kitchen, you can set it up so that you don't really have to use as much willpower, and you can set it up to make decisions for you. So I have a guide. It's a free guide on my website. If not to
let's share
promote myself, but it is really good. It's like getting everything cleaned out, setting it up, getting the right cooking utensils, and all of that really does set you up for a lot more success. So instead of walking in your kitchen going, I don't feel like being in here, I hate my kitchen. Yeah.
Well, as I was listening to you, I was just thinking, okay, how can what would cooking as a self-care activity look like for me?
Yeah.
And I think beautiful music.
Yes.
Or a cool podcast or something, so that I'm being like the sensory part of it. But I can see why people love it. I totally can. And for me, I guess it is just that time issue. It's the time. And when I really break that down, it's like, well, I have all the time in the world to treat the goddess how she needs to be treated and fed.
Yes. But we don't do it.
But it almost like a ritual is kind of what you're saying. Like you kind of set it up. So there's things around, there's like stations or whatever in your kitchen, and you wait. It's hard in the summer when everybody's underfoot, but when they go to school, it's a little easier. Yeah. I want to talk really quickly as we wrap up around sort of how we can send the right messages to our daughters. You have daughters, I have daughters. Yeah. About their bodies. I will say one thing that I've been really, really conscious of, because my two daughters in their 20s, and then I have a 7-year-old, is not making sure that I'm not complimenting their bodies a lot, or commenting, or like looking, like really being conscious around looking at what they're doing as women, as females, and what their gifts are, and not, really looking at what they're wearing, or, modesty. Let's just say I've done podcast episodes on the whole modesty, purity culture, and how that can sometimes be toxic because they tend to body shame, and there's too much of that male gaze thing. Yeah. So anyway, I'm curious what you've done with your daughters and how you're continuing those conversations.
Well, gosh, there's a lot of stuff that I do because I'm hyper aware of that since being a nutritionist and having struggled with my own issues. But I have things that I do that some people probably would not get or would not agree with. But the first thing I do is what you say, is that, I don't comment. I tell them that they're beautiful. And I say, you're most beautiful on the inside. Outside doesn't matter, but you are. And I'm not just telling you that because, I think it's important to tell your daughters you are beautiful. Yes. Because beauty comes in all different shapes and sizes. So just because they don't measure up to the standard does not mean that they're not beautiful. even though that shouldn't be the focus, but it is in our culture. But one thing that I do is I talk to them a lot about female sexuality, and I teach them about their bodies, and we talk about it. There's absolutely no shame. So it started early so that there wouldn't be shame, so we could say, we talk about literally everything, so that they know, to me, your sexuality is your source of power. And we are taught as women that we are supposed to use our sexuality to influence other people, but it's not ours to enjoy. And I think this whole thing of looking sexy and, all the Instagrammers and the TikToking and all these little girls dressed in these provocative outfits, I tell my daughters that your sexuality is nothing to be ashamed of, but you're not supposed to use it. The only reason you're using your sexuality is that it's your source of power. It's about being a mother and creating life, and it's about enjoying the most beautiful experience of connection that you could have with another human being. And so I feel like by teaching them that, I don't then have to say things like, you don't have to, I'm doing air quotes in case no one can see, you don't have to give it up for a man, or you don't have to save yourself. I just want them to have a feeling of control, and hopefully that will spill over into, the not feeling shame about their bodies in any way. So yeah.
There's so many, I love that. And we do discuss, sacred sexuality on here a lot, and how your sexuality is your own. And we were never shown that in healthy ways. It became about objectification, like with the pornography culture or the TikTok culture that's emerging now. And I remember when it was Snapchat. I mean, there's so many platforms where there's so much objectification at play. I feel it feels really empowering to be able to communicate to your daughters that they are sexual beings very young.
Yes.
And having it be boundaried. This is a big part of your creativity. This is a big part of your happiness. This is a big part of your beauty. Yeah. And your empowerment and the energy that reserves that you have. That messaging didn't come into my life till I was in my 40s.
Oh, Lord. Well, it's God-given. God gave you that. It's a beautiful thing. There's nothing shameful about it. And when we teach little girls that it is shameful, that's what creates pornography in my mind. It's this whole
it just drives it underground into a secretive off thing. So we talked about sort of the mixed messaging around the male gaze. We talked about healthy ways to sort of listen to yourself. And I love what you talked about, celebrating, what are the things you're doing right, as opposed to oh, look what. Yeah. So what would you say, circling back kind of to this disordered eating conversation, do you just have a couple of things to leave us with that can maybe help practically as we're moving through our days, to not go into beat up, to stay in the high vibe of self-care taking, to really stay in intuitive eating as a mindset? Are there things that worked for some of your clients and for you?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to get quiet at least once a day, where you stop, freaking out, running all over your house, like a crazy person. You have to just stop, give yourself 30 minutes, and hopefully not while you're watching TV or anything. But if you have to start there, just turn everything off when no one's around, take a few minutes, watch something that relaxes you. And then after that, just in a calm state, just reflect, go sit outside, take your dog for a walk, whatever, and just sit and let your intuition talk to you, because it is talking to you. We're just not listening to it,
Totally.
So that would be one. And then the second thing I would want to leave women with is that you are too beautiful and have too much potential to waste your entire life dieting and trying to lose weight. So if you just stop, I promise you, you will not blow up like a house. You will not be, everything isn't going to fall apart if you decide I'm not going to diet anymore. I'm going to just quit and start where I am and start taking small steps. I promise you that your life will change. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. The word that's coming to me is abundance.
Yeah.
It's scarcity thinking to restrict yourself, restrict your calories, restrict what you eat.
Yeah.
When you look at the whole world as your oyster, that you are beautiful, like you said, and that you have the power.
Yeah.
Your sexual energy, your creative energy, your heart, your intuition. I love it. So that's a great place to end, but tell our listeners where they can find you, Camille.
Yeah.
And your free guide that you're offering.
Okay. The free guide, if you go to my website, it's Camille Martin RD for registered dietitian. So CamilleMartinRD.com. And you can find my book under the shop tab, but it's also at LoveToLoseBook.com. So it's called Love to Lose. But the guide, there will be a pop-up that comes up and you can just enter your email and get it by email.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Camille.
Oh my gosh, I loved it. Thank you, Cherie.
So I think I was sensing a theme with this episode, and that is to just calm yourself, right? Everything in life, especially those things that we have appetites for, where there could be impulsivity involved, it's just taking this grand time out, just coming back to center and asking and doing the thought process around, am I making the wisest choice for this beautiful body of mine? It's not always easy to do that because we spiral down and we hold a lot of tension and we have a lot of emotional triggers, most of which are subconscious. For me, it was getting rid of a lot of the anger. I'm a former beauty pageant winner. Like, I had to be in this certain role for a while of like people knowing that I was this title holder. I don't know, between that and just the expectations of the culture, we talk about lookism and that patriarchal culture that has made women's bodies too sexual, right? So I really did have that purity culture angst in me, and I had to come to a space where I just got rid of that anger and resentment and allowed myself to express in the way that my soul wanted to express in this physical form. Like, there's a reason my soul chose this body, and this is a gift. So getting rid of the anger and embracing the gift has been a huge part of my healing, that she's just right. And I told you about the story of my grandparents following me when I was a little girl, or my parents or whatever. I don't remember who said it, following me and my sisters and going, oh, Cherie, she's just right. And how I interpreted that as less than or fat or average or status quo. There's so many things we say to ourselves that have such an impact on how we show up. A book that I want to recommend here, along with Camille's, is a book that I just found called The Body Is Not an Apology. So look that up on Amazon. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, and really bold and straightforward. So you'll see by the cover when you see it on Amazon, it's just this beautiful Black woman who's just expressing her body this way. And she has a lot to say on the matter. And she's an amazing writer and hilarious. I've actually been listening to it on Audible because I love her tone and her sass and just her boldness and wisdom. Again, thank you so much for listening this week to Women Seeking Wholeness. And you can find Camille and her offerings, including her book, on Camille Martin RD, as in registered dietitian, CamilleMartinRD.com. Have a glorious week, and we will talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.